Yeah.
Okay, welcome to the public meeting, Food Services Board meeting number 2509, Thursday, May 15th, to uh, today we're having a presentation. I'll introduce Karen McDonald, the Executive Director, Toronto's Checking Service and Ontario's Drug Checking Community, and Director of Program Development and Operations, St. Michael's Hospital, and Justine McIsaac, Coordinator of Consumption Treatment Services at Kingston's Integrated Care Hub, will speak to the board with respect to the implementation of the pilot program at the Integrated Care Hub. Please, after you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to come and speak about drug checking in Kingston's community. Just to give you some context as to why we decided to start drug checking in our community is because we have a bunch of people that are very unwell and are using substances that are very dangerous to not only the people that use them, but the greater community. And our goal with this program was to give people a better knowledge of what it was they were using, as well as the community. So the goal for me, for example, this morning, we had a very strange overdose, and I was able to take some of the equipment that that person had used and test it to see if there was anything different. If there was something different, I would have put an alert out to the community, forewarning them about what was going on and the potential risks for our citizens in regards to using substances. The reason I say this is a community based program is because not only do we all live and work and play in this community, but people have a strange relationship with drugs. And some people use drugs casually and not regularly, and their risk is still there with a toxic drug supply. So, the goal for this program was to not only bring in people that were regularly using substances, but those that dabble with substances as well too, that were at great risk. So, initially, I piloted a project with a local group through Queens, which was called Spectra Plasmatics. I helped them write a grant to Health Canada to pilot their equipment with the support of the municipality as well. In turn, that allowed me to get the equipment for free, which is a $30,000 piece of equipment. And I have worked on that relationship with them since. The machine itself takes a very small amount of the substance or a piece of equipment that that person has used to inject the substance, and we will test that, and it'll tell us exactly what is in the substance that the person used. And in turn, if it comes back with a non-conclusive answer, I can then send the sample to the Toronto drug checking community. So as I started to expand drug checking services, I was able to advertise it to the greater community. And it started to bring in a very different population of people that I'm used to in regards to identifying using substances. So I started to get young Queen students, people that casually use what would be quote unquote considered a party drug or party favor. And I've been able to give them results on that. So, for example, somebody presented a substance to me that looked like MDMA, which is considered a party drug. It's very casually used amongst young people in college, universities, things like that. This drug presented as if it was what it was, and it was not. It looked like MDMA, it was stamped as if it was MDMA, and it turned out to be pill pressed fentanyl. Now, the risks for that individual who has no opioid dependency whatsoever, that would have been consequential and most likely would have resulted in death for that individual if they had not come in and tested that drugs. Because he brought that sample in and I was able to test it, I was able then to work with public health and formulate a community alert to warn people that there was substances in our community that looked like something else, but actually weren't what they were presenting to be. And what that allowed that individual to do at the time was to make a conscious decision about whether they were going to use that substance or not. They chose not to use that substance. They had us destroy the substance in itself, and then we were able to formulate a report and put it out to the greater community so that people were well aware. And hopefully it prevented death in our community. So in turn, as we developed this program, we were able to connect with Karen, who has allowed us graciously to now send samples off-site to be able to be verified and further find out what exactly is being used in our community and how we can prevent harmful risks associated to people's drug use. So we're very grateful for that. We will continue to further the program. We will continue to advertise the program. We have to work under an exemption, a Section 56 exemption through Health Canada. So we're required to have that in order to test drugs, as well as to send those samples out to Karen for verification. So I'm not going to speak much further on that. If anybody has any questions about the process, feel free at the end, but I'll let Karen kind of go from here and go through the results of things that we see and trends that we see in regards to drug use in this province. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Justine. So I will share my screen, but before I get started, I did just want to provide a little bit of context about our program. So we initially received funding from Health Canada's Substance Use and Addictions Program to pilot one of the first community-based drug checking programs in the country back in 2018. And we have kind of, implemented in Toronto, built this program, and then we have since received further funding, which has allowed us to offer the service in other jurisdictions. Our hope is that we can actually set up a collection site, what we call a collection site, in each of Ontario's 29 public health unit jurisdictions. Kingston is actually the first jurisdiction that we have brought on outside of Toronto. That was back in November. And I just want to say that, there are many reasons why this information is critically important and why every jurisdiction should have access to this service and to this data. But really, and so obviously a central goal is just like getting the data out there. But also a central goal for us is just to really, build awareness about the important part that people who use drugs play in uncovering the composition of the unregulated drug supply, also building awareness about the essential public health services that organizations like the Integrated Care Hub are offering within their communities. And also another goal of ours, or a hope of ours, out of expanding this program is just that, we can kind of help to inform collaborative approaches and responses to the worsening crisis within jurisdictions across the province. So I will share screen, but yeah, thank you very much for having me. So just sharing here. You all can see. So I have a kind of short presentation, or I hope it's short, because we want to leave a lot of time for questions. I'm just really going to go over, what our program is, kind of how it works, a little bit about what we're uncovering about the unregulated drug supply, and then talk about how we disseminate our data and also how this information is being used to date. Sorry. And Justine's kind of just going to jump in because there's a lot of important context, especially once I get into the data and the degree of contamination and unpredictability that we are uncovering. It's really important to know what that actually means and looks like. So before I get started, I do want to make several acknowledgements. So first, we acknowledge the members of our communities that have lost their lives, both in the ongoing toxic drug supply crisis and long before. We acknowledge that racialized communities and survivors of colonization have been disproportionately impacted by the toxic drug supply crisis. We acknowledge that the land on which we operate in Toronto is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We acknowledge that many of the samples we check are linked to both fatal and non-fatal overdose, as well as adverse health events, and we acknowledge the people in pain behind the data that we share. And lastly, we acknowledge that we only have access to this data because people who use drugs donate drugs to our program in an effort to reduce harms associated with using unregulated substances and to facilitate what we call community-led drug market monitoring and education. And it's community-led because the drugs are coming from the community. So just a little bit about our program. So really, initially we were funded, sorry, to implement a pilot within Toronto. That was a 5-year pilot, which we called Toronto's Drug Checking Service. That was from 2018 to 2023. Toronto's drug checking service still very much exists, but we have received further funding to expand within the province, and we are calling that program Ontario's Drug Checking Community. So Ontario's drug checking community is a national leader in drug checking service delivery and community-led unregulated drug market monitoring and education. It involves implementing the off-site drug checking model designed and in use by Toronto's drug checking service since 2019 in other jurisdictions across the province. And really the reason that we are doing this is to inform evidence-based responses to the worsening toxic drug supply crisis. Our goal is to educate anyone who will listen about what it is that's circulating in the supply and how to reduce harms. But really focusing on, public health, people who use drugs, first responders, policymakers, and others. So our program in Toronto has now checked over 18,000 samples over the past 4.5 years. We do use what's known as gold standard instrumentation for chemical analysis that is validated for overdose prevention drug checking. So the reason why we have such good data is because of these very sophisticated instruments that we have access to. And so have checked over 18,000 samples. We have publicly disseminated hundreds of reports on the composition of the drug supply. And our program really has received, international recognition and is considered a national authority on Canada's unregulated drug supply. So in many cases, our program is the first because all of our data is very public. That's the point. So in many cases, our program is the first to notify the public when a new or novel psychoactive substance is circulating. But oftentimes, our program has actually been the first in the country to detect that those drugs are circulating in our supply. So a little bit about who we are. So our program is made up of 3 groups. There are collection sites, analysis sites, and then the central operating team. And I've included all of those groups on this wheel that you can see on the screen. So collection sites are community agencies that are exempted to collect samples from and share results with service users. Their, main role, like the Integrated Care Hub, is just to, have existing and trusted relationships with people who use drugs, collect samples, share results, and really educate their communities about what it is that's circulating. You can see on the screen, we have over 20 collection site members at this time. All of the dark blue members have their exemptions and are actively offering services. The light blue are in the process of acquiring exemptions. Lots of sites in Toronto, Peterborough, Kingston, Thunder Bay currently offering services. And then we have about 10 other regions that will be onboarding. Next, we have analysis sites. So these are the purple. We currently have 3. These are clinical research or government labs that are exempted to analyze samples and report drug checking results. And we're super fortunate. These are, scientific experts who are incredibly skilled at determining the composition of really any specimen, and we're using drugs. And then we have the central operating team. So that's the team that I run at St. Michael's Hospital, super small team. Our job is really just to make the lives of the collection sites and the analysis sites easier. As you can maybe imagine, Justine alluded to the fact that we operate by way of exemptions. That is not easy. Acquiring an exemption, managing an exemption is not easy, a ton of paperwork. And so our central team tries to take on a lot of that heavy lifting just to ensure that the collection sites can just, collect samples, build relationships, and the analysis sites can analyze samples. And also our central team is responsible for all of the drug market monitoring that the program does. So in terms of how it works, so as I mentioned, we offer what is known as an off-site drug checking model. So an off-site drug checking model really means that you are collecting samples in one place and you are analyzing them elsewhere. The Integrated Care Hub actually offers a hybrid on-site, off-site model because they have the Spectroplasmonics Amplify ID that they can use at the point of care and then access off-site checking through us. Already talked about exemptions, but yeah, just to say, this is all completely legal and above the board. And we're very grateful to have a framework with which we can work in. However, exemptions are super tricky and they are kind of vulnerable to political changes, which can make, just our entire field very vulnerable. So the first step in really getting this service set up in Kingston was to ensure that the Integrated Care Hub had the appropriate amendment to their exemption. Once that was done, which was last July, we were able to, train and onboard the site and then launch services, which we did in November. So once, services are running, I'm just kind of going to run you through how this all works. So first samples are collected. So we collect two types of samples. We collect both drugs and used drug equipment. When it comes to an actual substance, we ask for 10 milligrams, which is approximately the size of a match head. And those samples are secured in a pre-labeled, pre-weighed vial or baggie. At the time of collection, we do ask service users a few questions. Specifically, we ask them what they bought or got their drug as. That's known as the expected drug. This really helps to tailor harm reduction strategies and information, but it also really helps us to understand contamination in the supply rather than just like combinations of drugs that are circulating. We also ask service users, if they're planning to wait for their results, which is less likely going to happen here in Kingston because turnaround times are about a week. In Toronto, our turnaround times are a day. So some folks are in a position to wait. And we ask them, if their sample was associated with overdose or any adverse health events. The service is completely anonymous. So every sample has a sample ID, as you can see up on the screen. So a service user can choose to take their sample ID with them if they want to access their results later. In Toronto, this is very common practice because, again, the results are available the next day. And service users can either go back to the collection site to get their results, or they can go onto our website to get them by entering their sample ID. A little less relevant in Kingston because, by the time a week has passed, maybe that drug is no longer circulating. But so, yeah, it's not as often. I don't think that individual service users are coming back for their direct results, but a possibility. Otherwise, the results just go right back to the collection site. So after the sample has been collected, it is stored. So this is as per our exemption. We have a, approved locked cabinet within each site where the samples are stored until they are transported. Once per week is how it works in Kingston. We have the first ever federal approval to be able to use commercial courier to transport illegal substances for drug checking purposes. And we work with Purolator. So basically what happens is over the course of a week, Justine's team will set up to 12 samples aside. That's what we can accept at this time in their locked cabinet. And then once per week on an agreed upon day, we dispatch Purolator to come pick up the samples. Everything is logged, like chain of custody is, very, very controlled given what it is that we're doing. Yeah, sorry.
I think what's important to note about this for the population that I work with at the Integrated Care Hub is how little of a sample they need that they have to give up. I'm working with a population by no means is rich or trafficking a large amount of drugs. A majority of them have the bare minimum of what they need in order to quote unquote feel well or be well. So I was very worried at first that I wouldn't be able to get people that would be willing to give me any amount of their drug to test, but because we need so little or can use previously used drug equipment, it has made it very easy for people to be willing to give us samples to test.
Yeah, thanks, Justine. And what's really great about the Spectra instrument is that essentially you can prepare a sample for the Spectra instrument and then just send us what remains of that sample. So it's kind of like you can hit multiple birds with one stone. So once samples have been transported, they arrive at one of our analysis sites where they are analyzed. So the instrumentation that we use is gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, or high resolution liquid chromatography, mass spectrometry. So these are instruments that are generally used in the clinical setting to, determine the composition of like blood and urine and other biological specimens. But we are using them to check drugs. Once the sample has been analyzed, results are reported. So we do have a software that like all of this runs through from start to finish. Sample collection, transportation, reporting, and receipt of results. So the analysis site will essentially, determine which substances were found in that sample. Depending on the technology that is used, in some cases, we can also report not only which substances were found, but exactly how much of each substance was found in a sample. And then I know this is really small, but that's kind of an example of our result. Then that's actually, sorry, that is ICH, that is a Kingston result. So you can see that, this person submitted fentanyl. Those are all of the drugs listed below that was actually in their fentanyl. So a mix of, other benzos, other high potency opioids, veterinary tranquilizers, and so on. So results would go back to the collection site where they would be kind of, immediately shared with folks within the site, the service user, if the service user wishes to receive their results. Otherwise, or kind of above and beyond, what happens is clearly we are generating a ton of information on the composition of the drug supply in real time. And our commitment is to get that information back out into the community as soon as possible. So what my team does then is we aggregate all of the data and we determine, trends, and we make those trends publicly accessible, both on our website and by way of written reports and social media and other things. Which I will get more into. So moving on now to what it is that we're finding. So all of the actual data that I am going to show is from samples that were collected in Toronto, just because we have way more. We have checked 18,000 samples. We only have 140 samples from Kingston so far. So I'm kind of showing you Toronto data, but then I want to give you a little bit of insight on, local data as well at the same time. So to begin, this is just a summary of what service users have submitted to us to be checked. So as I mentioned, when a service user submits their sample, we ask them, what did you buy or get this drug as? And we call that the expected drug. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that, almost 50% of the samples that we have checked in Toronto are what folks got or bought as fentanyl. Fentanyl is, very much a drug of choice and something that people choose to use and are therefore submitting it to our program. And then the other kind of 50% of the samples that we have checked are a variety of other opioids, stimulants, psychedelics, and depressants. And I did just want to mention, so since between December and May, we have checked 140 samples that were collected at the Integrated Care Hub. 80% of those are what folks expected to be fentanyl. Majority of those have been drug samples, but we also have received some used equipment. So just to give you an idea of what it is that we've been collecting here. And really, we're funded to be checking fentanyl because it is fentanyl and the contamination and unpredictability of the fentanyl supply and the opioid supply more broadly that is driving this crisis. And so that's what we're primarily funded to check, but we do check other things as well. So this next graph just presents the frequency that samples are meeting service users' expectations. So this is now, not what did people expect, but actually what did we find in the drugs that we checked. So we classify a sample as meeting a service user's expectation if the only drug we found in that sample was the drug they expected. So you can think of, moving through this graph, along the x-axis at the bottom is the proportion of drug samples checked. Along the y-axis on the left are various different expected drugs. And then we're just trying to show you, how often are these samples meeting service users' expectations. You can think of the orange as being predictable, not contaminated. You can think of the yellow as being unpredictable and contaminated. And the yellow really means the orange means only the expected drug was found with or without non-drug fillers. The yellow means either the expected drug was not found at all, or it was, more commonly, it was found, but in combination with many other things that service users don't expect. So just kind of moving through the list, 90% of the ketamine samples that we check meet service users' expectations. 83% MDMA, 82% meth, even like cocaine, 75%, crack. Once you start getting down into unregulated opioids, these samples are very rarely meeting service users' expectations, especially with fentanyl. Only 3% of the samples have met service users' expectations. So really just what the picture that we're trying to paint with this graph is that, it's essentially impossible for people who use fentanyl to use safely when the majority of the time they have no idea what it is that they're using and their drugs are so contaminated. And on the Kingston front, not a single fentanyl sample that has been collected by the Integrated Care Hub since we launched this service has met service users' expectations. So every single sample has been contaminated with unexpected drugs. So, what is it that is contaminating fentanyl then is really going to be the focus of this part of my presentation. So there are a variety of things that are contaminating the fentanyl supply, and it is ever changing, which is why programs to understand the composition of the drug supply are so important. But what we have determined, is that the unregulated fentanyl supply contains many other high potency opioids and central nervous system and or respiratory depressants that service users don't expect. And these drugs increase the risk of overdose for our communities, and also the risk of dangerous suppression of the vitals, while also complicating overdose response.
Yeah, that is, since we have watched the drug supply become more and more toxic over the years, since we've opened consumption treatment services, it has changed our overdose response drastically. Where when we first opened, an opioid overdose response was pretty cut and dry. Now it has become so complicated that we've had to change our whole process of how we respond to overdoses to ensure that we're keeping people as safe as possible. So we're constantly on a learning curve as to how we can treat people appropriately and keep them as safe as possible.
So just running through some examples. So these, and again, this is Toronto data, but these are high potency opioid trends in expected fentanyl samples since we launched the service. So again, a lot going on this graph. But essentially, we classify an opioid as high potency if it is considered to be roughly as strong as or stronger than fentanyl. So you can see along the bottom there that since we launched our service, we have detected 14 different high potency opioids in the unregulated fentanyl supply. The dark line along the top is just any high potency opioid presenting in fentanyl. The peach is fentanyl proper. The purple is floral fentanyl, which is a fentanyl analog considered to be as strong as fentanyl. The blue, same, methylfentanyl. The kind of number 4 there, that little gray line, that's what's known as a nitazene opioid that we actually just recently detected in the unregulated fentanyl supply. It is considered to be as strong as fentanyl. And then you can also see carfentanil, that's number 5, is kind of coming in and out of the market and has been since we launched. There actually was just a resurgence of it just recently in Toronto and Kingston as well. So yeah, really just to show you that, folks are buying fentanyl, they're choosing to use fentanyl, but there are many other high potency opioids that they aren't expecting presenting in the drugs that they are using, definitely increasing the risk of overdose. And yeah, just to say these, the drugs that are currently presenting, the high potency opioids that are currently presenting in Toronto are also presenting here. So fentanyl, floral fentanyl, methylfentanyl, and carfentanil, and protodesnitazene. Moving on now to other central nervous system and respiratory depressants. So these are benzodiazepine-related drugs that are presenting in the unregulated fentanyl supply. So, benzos are usually prescribed by doctors to treat things like anxiety and insomnia. They have been circulating in the unregulated fentanyl supply since before our program launched. But what's really changed is kind of the variability in how often they're presenting, which benzo-related drugs are presenting. Many of these benzo-related drugs actually are novel and aren't prescribed, so we actually don't know what their strength and duration are, and now they are being used by our populations. So just to show you, kind of this mess of benzodiazepines in the supply. We interestingly have seen in Toronto have seen a huge decrease in benzos lately. We're not seeing that as much here in Kingston, but again, not checking as many samples.
So the benzodiazepines has really been like the bane of my existence, and that is really what's complicating not only overdose response, but a lot of behaviors associated to people's substance use. So, first off, benzodiazepines is one of the only things that you can actually die from when withdrawing. And again, like Karen said, we don't know necessarily the potency of all of these benzodiazepines and how strong they are when people are consuming them. So people are now not only withdrawing off of opiates, but a very complicated benzodiazepine too, which puts people at risk. You should never be prescribed benzodiazepine long term because it actually changes the chemical makeup in your brain. So when we have people that are potentially injecting or smoking a substance that has such a high potency benzo in it multiple times a day, we are seeing the effects of that on people's behaviors and their brain capacity and function as well too. So this to me is one of the most important things to know about in the community, especially from a law enforcement perspective when our constables are out on the road working with people. This education, I think, is really important to understand what is going on with people's behaviors, how complex they can be. We used to call people that use benzodiazepines, we almost referred to it as a dry drunk because people would get so mean and unpredictable when using benzodiazepines. And I'm seeing that now when working with people. Also, I can treat an opioid overdose. I cannot treat a benzodiazepine overdose in the consumption site. So again, this is what complicates kind of my day-to-day job in regards to servicing people that are using illicit drugs. So it's caused quite a mess. And I'm seeing the consequences now of noxious brain injuries and long-term use of benzodiazepines.
And in Kingston since December, we have detected 6 different benzos in the unregulated fentanyl supply. Uh, we also are seeing veterinary tranquilizers. So, there's been a lot of talk about xylazine and medetomidine circulating in the unregulated drug supply. So, we first detected xylazine in the samples that we were checking in 2021, and we weren't seeing it super commonly. But as you can see, it's just completely taken off. So yeah, these are vet tranquilizer trends in expected fentanyl samples since 2021. The blue are samples that only contain xylazine. The purple are the proportion of samples that contained both xylazine and medetomidine, and then the pink are medetomidine alone. So you can just see like a complete takeoff of vet tranquilizers in the supply, which has huge complications for people who use drugs and those providing care to them.
Yeah, so when responding to an overdose, when we know there's xylazine in it, I almost know instantaneously now. What it does is it completely plummets somebody's blood pressure. So I'll watch the color almost drain out of their face instantaneously. It creates hypertension in the heart. It creates a lot of different complications. It's presenting wounds in people on people that I've actually never seen before that are very, very hard to treat. And what people need to understand when people are choosing to use fentanyl, generally they're choosing to use fentanyl to treat physical, emotional, or mental pain. They're not looking to be sedated for 12 hours at a time. And unfortunately, when this tranquilizer is in the substance and people are using it, they're sedated for long, long periods of time, which makes them vulnerable to many different things. So it's very complex. And now people are trying to actively seek fentanyl that doesn't have quote unquote trank in it because those are not the desired effects that they're looking for when using fentanyl.
So yeah, just to say, the increase in vet tranquilizers presenting in the unregulated fentanyl supply is something that we're, seeing kind of across the board. It's not just a Toronto thing. This is just a graph that Justine and I were chatting this morning. This isn't as relevant at this time, I don't think, to Kingston, or maybe it's just that we don't have enough data. But this graph is just presenting the proportion of fentanyl samples that have contained a benzo alone, which is the pink, a benzo and a vet tranquilizer together, which is the green, and or just a vet tranquilizer without a benzo, which is the blue. And these are again samples from Toronto. It's just really interesting to see since we launched our service. It was like, only benzos that we were seeing and in large proportions. And then suddenly it's like veterinary tranquilizers entered the market and now it's a complete flip. Now we're actually in Toronto, based on our data, hardly seeing benzos, but seeing vet tranquilizers take its place. So just like completely unpredictable for people using drugs, for people providing services to people who use drugs, like just across the board, just, incredibly challenging. So that's kind of on the, the first kind of observation about fentanyl, which is that it is contaminated. The second observation about fentanyl is that it is unpredictable. And this is really what's also driving overdose deaths. So as I mentioned, one of the instruments that we use is actually able not only to detect that fentanyl is present in a sample, but also quantify the amount of fentanyl that is in a sample. And of course, when you're using a drug that is so strong, it is like critically important to know how much of it you're using. And this is something that people who are using drugs from the unregulated drug supply don't have access to. So this is just again, all of these graphs are on our website, by the way, so I should just say that ahead of time. They're updated every other week with data from Toronto. But this is a graph from our website that shows, fentanyl concentrations or amounts in the fentanyl samples we have checked since 2020. We have quantified fentanyl in 300 samples, 3,000 samples, not 300. The only thing I really wanted to kind of point out here is just to kind of show you the variability. Like if you look at between August 2024 and November 2024, in August, the average amount of fentanyl in a fentanyl sample was 5%. But then in November, it drops down to 0.7%. So it's like, for one thing, what does that mean for the person who's using the drug? Are they experiencing withdrawal? But also think about if you were to flip it the other way, someone's tolerance is kind of down because the fentanyl supply is quote unquote weaker. And then suddenly the next month it increases by 5 times the amount. Of course, the risk of overdose is going to be higher. I just wanted to show you in the second column there, that's kind of the interquartile range. So the amount of fentanyl in 50% of the samples quantified, in December 2024 was between 1% and 9%. It's kind of hard when you're looking at these as percentages, but if you were to actually convert these amounts of fentanyl to like morphine equivalents, for example, there's a huge difference, even in just in a percentage difference. And then just at the bottom there, you can see, in January 2024, the smallest amount of fentanyl we quantified in a sample was 0.3%. The largest amount was 83%. So like as a person who uses drugs or is responding, providing services. Want to add anything to that? No? Good. Yeah. And the last thing I just wanted to say on the trends front. So this is a question that we get a lot. And I know Justine was providing an example of was it MDMA, sorry, that was contaminated with fentanyl. And we do get a lot of questions about like, how often are you finding fentanyl in other drugs, non-opioids? To be honest, it's not something that we see a lot. And this is consistent across drug checking programs throughout North America. So we have checked over 8,000 samples that were not expected to be opioids. And we've actually only confirmed fentanyl or another high potency opioid in 11 of those. So certainly not to say that it doesn't happen. The risks are incredibly high, but I do think there's just this general conception that this happens all the time. And what kind of worries me about that messaging is just that we're detracting from the population of people who are actually at risk. If we're putting all of our focus on, people who use cocaine and MDMA and their risk of being contaminated with fentanyl, we're kind of ignoring the population of people who actually are at risk and dying. So I just wanted to share that. So now just in terms of how we disseminate our findings. So as I mentioned, a huge priority of ours, like we don't want to sit on this data. We want to generate it and get it right back out into the community as quickly as possible. So we do have a website. Currently, our website just says Toronto's Drug Checking Service. We will be converting it over to Ontario's Drug Checking Community. We have about 9, I think, interactive graphs at this point with all of our data. It's updated every other week. There are also many drugs that are circulating in the drug supply that are super hard to pronounce, that people don't know what they are. So we have a drug dictionary on our website that we try to keep up to date that just really gives people a, basic definition of what this drug is, where we usually find it. We also, there's a lot of information on there. We also have reports So I'd encourage you to check that out. This is an example of a written report that we generate every other week in Toronto and disseminate broadly. So really what we're just trying to communicate here in hopefully, another format for folks if they don't want to go to our website is just in writing, what are the changes in the supply over the last 2 weeks? For our sites outside of Toronto, we generate these reports monthly. So this is an example of a report that we generated for the Integrated Care Hub and for Kingston in April. So definitely interested, to talk to you folks about how we can ensure that you all receive this information and if there are ways that we can further translate it so it's more helpful to you in the services that you offer. Definitely open to that. We do have social media. So on Instagram, we post our results as well to help, build attention and draw awareness. There's a lot of community posting and education that happens. So this is just a whiteboard from one of our collection sites, and you can see one of our graphs hanging at a site. So really kind of trying to engage people who use drugs in the results that are being generated and try to reduce harm and, generate awareness. And then lastly, our data is being used to contribute to public health alerts, as Justine mentioned, is also happening here in Kingston. The media is picking up our data and a lot of other groups.
Thank you. So a question for either of you. If fentanyl is like so dirty or unpredictable, why is it the drug of choice for so many people?
Unfortunately, the population that I work with has opioid dependency, so they're physically dependent on it. Primarily, the population before bootleg fentanyl was introduced to the market, primarily people were using Oxycontin. It was overprescribed, but we didn't see near the amount of deaths associated because it was prescription grade. People developed a tolerance to it. They knew how to dose themselves appropriately. This is kind of what's available in the illicit market. And really, it's, in my opinion, people just taking advantage of very vulnerable, sick people in the long run. But yeah, it's not necessarily about choice. It's about there's no other option for people in the illicit market. Obviously, from a treatment perspective, as a support worker, I'm always looking for ways and means to reduce people's risk of either their use or overdose, whether it be through methadone, Suboxone, Sublocade, things like that. But it's unfortunately it's not a choice at this point. It's what's on the market.
And are you seeing overdoses daily?
Yes.
And you deal with those?
Yes.
You're a rock star.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did one right before I came here.
Wow.
Thank you both for that presentation. That was really, really interesting, very useful. I'm curious to know if you see a trend in the data in Toronto, how likely is it to be predictive of that we're going to see exactly the same thing in Kingston? Because I appreciate that we've got the testing in Kingston as well, which is great. Just is it usually a one-to-one or like with a delay? Like if you see a particular trend in a substance being included in an unregulated fentanyl in Toronto, does that mean like 2 or 3 weeks later we might see the same thing in Kingston? Is it instantaneous? Is there anything you've been able to draw so that we're able to understand that?
I'll just speak off of my experience over the years and then maybe Karen backs it up or not. So even prior to drug testing being available in a lot of the communities, people that do harm reduction work or worked with people that use drugs, there was kind of a network of, telephone. And we always kind of saw, for the most part, things trend from west to east, right? So generally we would, get a phone call saying we saw an increase of overdoses most likely coming your way. Usually Guelph was my point of contact. Generally, yes. When I look at the reports from Toronto, we'll see something that I haven't seen, and then a couple weeks later, we end up seeing it through the testing.
Yeah, and it's a little hard to say just because the program's quite new and we don't have a lot of data, just differences in the number of samples. But yeah, I think what we are seeing is that there is consistency across the markets. Interestingly, there was a synthetic cannabinoid, which presented in Kingston's drug supply that we have not detected in Toronto. And we detected in both Kingston and Peterborough. So it is interesting. It's like, I don't necessarily know if it's necessarily west to east or east to west sometimes, or it's just, yeah.
Or some, my apologies. Sometimes, yeah, it could even be something local, right? Somebody has stepped on something and added their own concoction of things as well too to maximize profits. From my own experience, I believe that it is helping. So the difference between us and Belleville's, we have a consumption site that's able to provide support to people who are using that illicit drug, so that they're not, in a concentrated area of town, unsafe and using an unregulated supply. I think being able to do drug checking allows each other to educate each other and ensure that people aren't using alone, that they're calling 911 when there is overdoses, ensuring that people have Narcan, all the skills and the tools. And those are things that we can continuously reiterate when people are accessing our service, on top of the outreach supports that we provide to people as well too. So I think we are just at an advantage where we can get the knowledge out to people quicker and faster, so that they can apply their own harm reduction practices to either reduce their risk or support each other if there is an incident.
Gail and then Christian.
Thank you very much. I was privileged yesterday or to do a visit to the site. Thank you very much for welcoming us into a safe space and that you've created. One of the things that you mentioned on the tour that was new knowledge to me was you mentioned just before coming today how your intervention not only helped save a life, but also you talked about the cost savings and the resource savings to the Kingston community. And I don't think that I was not aware of how significant that was. And would you mind taking a moment to speak to that?
Sure. So, thank you. I appreciate those kind words. Um, yeah, I think what's important to note is we do all the interventions in regards to an overdose response right in the site itself. So generally, it costs me about $85 to respond to an overdose fully and completely. I'm going to go with some increase in economic based stuff and say 105 on a bad day. And that actually includes the response to the overdose itself, the aftercare, and any referrals or supports that we provide. On the low end, if we were to, so it's really ER diversion. On the low end, if we were to send somebody to hospital due to an overdose, on the low end, we're talking 1,600 as upwards to 7,800 for that overdose response. And that's not including any of the aftercare or supports or anything like that. So we all know, I think we're all very well aware how fragile our healthcare system is at this time, how complex substance use and mental health can be. And I think it's really important that these programs exist not only to alleviate some of the pressures on our local emergency healthcare systems, but also to ensure that we're getting the education out to people and the supports and really, you know, I have the time, maybe a physician that emerged doesn't have the time when they have X amount of patients on their caseload for that day, but I may have the time to actually sit down with that person after an overdose and say, hey, like that was scary. What do you want to do about this? How can we look at ways and means that we can support you to ensure that this doesn't happen again, right? And so it's not only the care, but the time that we have to give to that individual. And I think it's important for the community to know that we really are running an ER diversion program, and also triaging and supporting a lot of complex healthcare needs that are related to people's substance use. Like I said, with this toxic drug supply, I've never seen so many complex healthcare needs associated to people's drug use, and the things that we're seeing associated to noxious brain injuries and behaviors associated to that. It really has changed like the community dynamic in regards to people that are using drugs.
Christian, go ahead.
Karen, Justine, thanks for coming and presenting. Karen, thanks for making the trip to Toronto. And I get the sense from my distinguished board members that they're finding this presentation as fascinating as when I first saw it in terms of, so that's the essence of my question in terms of if you have one takeaway for us as a board, what would you want that to be? And if you could have Kingston Police take away or change one thing, based on sort of your experience and in particular the knowledge that you now have as a result of this data, what would that be?
That's a heavy question. Yeah, I think I've said this to people before, but I think um, watching how complex people's mental health and substance use needs have become. I've also watched in the years that I've been doing this work, the expectations of police on road grow to an unrealistic expectation. I've watched police become police to crisis workers, to triage workers, to finding people shelter, to dealing with complex mental health and substance use needs, to responding to overdoses. This is really, I feel like, has really impacted policing. And so, first off, I'd like to thank you guys for everything that you do. But I think the takeaway is that for me, in working with this complex population, is that and please forgive me, but the intent is to get high, not to die. People are seeking momentary relief from like excruciating physical, mental, and emotional pain. And it's really the bigger picture as to what happened to these people along the way. It's not necessarily what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you, and how much we need to invest in caring for a very vulnerable, complex population and looking for ways and means to help them not only deal with the traumas that they carry, but feel supported and accepted and develop new coping techniques for themselves. Unfortunately, drugs have a functional purpose for some people, and generally they start using drugs because they served a purpose for them. But as I've watched people go through this very complex, hard lifestyle, I've seen it create more chaos, more trauma, more hurt for these individuals, and it really doesn't get them any further. So I think the takeaway should be is, A, we need to be a lot kinder to our police that are doing the best they can in a community or communities with little resources to help this crisis. But that people are not enjoying this. They're not out living a free for all. This is not them not wanting to be better, not wanting to work, or not wanting to have housing. It's their needs are just so complex and they're just really sick, hurting people. And we need to remember that day in and day out, that these are still members of our community that need love and acceptance.
Hi, Christian. I guess key takeaways from me would be first, that we need to accept in rare cases, fentanyl is not what is contaminating other things. In fact, it is fentanyl that is contaminated, and that is really what is driving this crisis. And, we really do need timely and accessible information about what is circulating in the drug supply and public information, regardless of whether you're focused on community safety, harm reduction, treatment, prevention. Understanding what it is that's in the drug supply is crucial. So I think just like, the more information that we can try to generate and make publicly available, and then just really work together to respond. There is no there is no single response to this crisis clearly, and it is persisting. So I think, yeah, just as much collaboration as possible, kind of, and just recognizing that everybody's doing their best, but also recognizing the incredibly important role that like each different stakeholder plays.
Adam.
Thank you again for coming. Going to the site yesterday was amazing for so many reasons, but one of the things that I applaud is that here in Kingston, which is the only center that we know of, the amount of trust that obviously has gone on because of your services, your staff, your support, without breaching that trust to the people that are coming to you, which amazes me. I'm standing there with the chief and deputy police, and we have people that you're saying are coming in with their drugs and their testing. It's an amazing amount of trust. That being said, as a collaboration with the police, one of the big things I would see that your assistance is this removal of the toxic drugs that are occurring of people that are vulnerable, who are being taken advantage of by those that are actually creating a cheaper drug to make more money at the expense of someone's life, or because of their inability to stop using on their own. If it's a question that could be answered, but is there a conduit? Is there something that is utilized between you and the police that does assist to find the toxic drug supply, which is probably one of the larger systems that could be enforced to remove this? And maybe that's one of the problems that we have, is that we have toxic supply on the streets.
Well, from my perspective, the supply is always going to be toxic if it's unregulated. So I think that's really the issue. Either we need to kind of transition people off of it, whether that means by them stopping using drugs or providing them a pharmaceutical or alternative or whatever it may be, or we need potentially different policies. Yeah, I'm not sure like at this time what our service and police can do to really like clean up the supply. Um, Interestingly, what we have seen is that one of the primary things that service users do with their results is go back to the person they bought their drugs from and put kind of what we call grassroots pressure on the supply. So going back to someone and saying, I bought this, but I'm actually getting this. I don't want this thing. I'm either not going to use it, I'm going to go find it from someone else, or at least just like providing that feedback so like that's there as well. I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but.
I feel like that's the best answer she could have given you. But again, just sharing the knowledge with each other too. Like I said, ensuring that our constables that are out on road dealing with people every day, they have an understanding of what's going on in community and behaviors associated to drug use, and are well equipped to try and support and deal with some of that.
Okay. I would like to thank you both for a very informative presentation. Thank you. Thank you. I'll start again. Through the communications, that the following communications from the Inspector General of Policing of Ontario and the Ministry of the Solicitor General be received by the board. Is there any questions of any of those? No? Okay, then we'll first and second. Thank you, Brian, Gail, all in favor. Then there's the information reports. That the could ask the Director of Finance to speak to the Kingston Police Service Board 2025 operating budget. Scarlett? Oh,
Christian, we're having Scarlett come up to microphone.
you want to do, you're not prepared to speak on the boards? Whatever you're comfortable
No,
with.
no, I'm just, there's two separate reports that are on the agenda today. One's for the first quarter for the board's expenses and then one's for all of Kingston Police. So the one that we're referring to now is for the board. So I'll just provide a couple of highlights, and then if you have any questions, I might have to refer to
Sounds good.
another member of the board. So sitting at the end of April with respect to the results, it compares to, it's $248,000 comparing to a budget of 688,000. So there's a slight deficit of about $19,000. Sorry, just flipping through. The salaries and wages are over by about $18,000. I will point out that the honorariums and are typically paid out once or twice a year, so it kind of influences because of the timing difference. And then salary and wages also includes the full-time salaries for both the chief and the board, which would also include key items like maybe overtime for the board admin and things like that. So it's over slightly. It's 36.9%. And then when we move down into supplies and services, basically this is on budget at $63,000 or 34.02% of the annual budget. And again, different types of supplies included are mostly legal, consulting costs and contracted services, and then memberships. So when we look at memberships, they are fully paid for, they get paid at the beginning of the year. So you're going to notice kind of that blip because they get paid for the entire year at the beginning of the year. And then there are some advertising and marketing is under budget. And these really reflect different contributions to different organizations and associations, like the annual golf tournament for the police association, the CAPG and OAPSB conferences, and these are kind of provided right before the event occurs. And then again, the education and training is over budget. Education, training, and travel is over budget, reflecting really this includes attendance at 3 different conferences. So there's the OAPSB annual conference and AGM, CAPG Winter Summit, and the CAPG annual conference. And then professional services are sitting at $41,000. And like I referred to earlier, this reflects legal advice and other occupational health services. And I think that's about it for the notable variances, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to help, and if I can't answer, I can pass on to Lori.
Questions, anyone? No, good with that. Thank you. Next. She's not talking yet, Christian. It's okay.
Okay. Again, sorry I didn't say afternoon to anyone, but afternoon everyone and Chair Stearns and members of the board. So I'm here today to provide a financial update on the year-to-date April results. I know it says Q1, but it is really till the end of April. And it took a little bit longer than we would have liked, purely because of the cyber incident and us trying to get access back to the systems and get all the data in there. So I just want to mention that. So overall, our net operating position at the end of April reflects a surplus position at 31.8% of the total budget, or 822,000. It's funny how one little percent can be that high, but it is. So while these results are positive, I can attest to the fact that, and everyone, I guess, in all at Kingston Police can attest to the fact that the past months have been challenging because of the cyber incident. So we've been thrown a bit of a curveball. So I will talk about that a little bit throughout the report. As noted in this report, most of the regular revenues and expenses are tracking as expected and reflect anticipated seasonal and timing variances really normally experienced year to year. So no surprise. And while the majority of these are within budget, there are some notable variances which I will speak to now. And again, most revenues are what we would anticipate this time of year. I will speak to the positive first. So expenditure recoveries, again, we are seeing an increase and have been in the last, at least for the entire time I've been here with the Special Services Group, lobbying CISO and other organizations and getting us an additional funding. And I can really say that this has really helped us achieve a lot of different things. So expenditure recoveries reflect 122,000 in additional unbudgeted officers secondment recoveries from Criminal Intelligence Service Ontario, supporting regional intelligence. And then we also have an additional contribution from Correctional Service Canada, and this is supporting the Joint Uncrewed Aerial Vehicles, UAV, and again, and Contraband Interdiction Task Force. So these additional revenues are offsetting corresponding officer salary and benefit costs. So this is really great. One thing on the not so plus side, related to revenues are our background check revenues, which are under budget by around $157,000 at the end of April. Really, this one's attributed to the recent cyber incident, which temporarily limited our ability to provide the services. In addition to us not generating the revenue, we had to contract out our criminal record checks to other police services in order to maintain service continuity, and which really that is also impacting our expenditures. And again, I'm not a policing person, but I know that they have to be able to run CPICs to run our own operations. So it should be noted that their revenues would typically be lower at this time of the year, but just based on regular seasonal timing, but not this low. Moving to expenses, just to talk about some of the notable ones that are impacting our year-to-date variance. So our full-time wages are currently under budget to date. This really is primarily due to the staff vacancies and the timing of our new hires. So as everyone's aware, the 2025 budget includes 13 new positions, which were intended to offset our long-term absences. So these, right at the beginning of the year, we posted for all these, and we've been hurriedly trying to fill these positions. So this is based on a purely timing, and it is challenging right now to recruit, which everyone knows. And then in addition, the other thing that's sort of skewing our results are the fact that our wages again are scheduled to increase for July 1st. So that throws the skewing of our results off a bit. And that's a noted increase in the collective agreement. And then we continue to experience pressures related to absentee costs for WSIB, sick, and workers that are being accommodated, not frontline deployable. So again, this is, from a cost perspective, is just continuing to increase. Moving down to some of our service and contract expenses, the overage in professional services. So it's significant, and primarily this reflects costs related to the cyber incident response, including specialized legal services, on-site consulting support around containment, investigation, communication, and recovery. Cost related to the restoration phase and what we should be doing going forward, including replacement, rebuilding, and upgrading of IT infrastructure to restore operations and ensure future cybersecurity resilience. We've charged all of that will be going to our IT capital budget envelope. So our operating budget is purely only reflecting any type of support that we've had to bring in from outside. So consulting that's purely operational, nothing capital, but we thankfully have an IT capital budget envelope that has been able to accommodate additional costs to get us back up to running and to a better place. And we are also, I can tell you, spending tons of time behind the scenes as a group, evaluating all the service contracts that we already have. And we've actually been able to also cover off some of the costs by not moving forward with some contracts that we had and looking at better solutions. So that's another way that we're helping to offset the cyber incident. And I know that this is going to be a topic for next month's meeting, but and then again, I know you received a separate report on St. Patrick's Day, but this was really good news. The results do include the costs related to policing the St. Patrick's Day event, and with the known expenses, overtime, part-time hours, other police service, reinforcements, food, other supplies. The total cost for the 2025 St. Patrick's Day mass gathering deployment was 87,000, which again, noted last month is a 50% decrease from 2024, which was around 176,000. So that's really, really great news. That's actually more. And again, I can tell you behind the scenes, staff are always going to continue to monitor the financial impacts of these mass gatherings with the intent to continuously look at measures that will reduce these costs. And we continue to remain diligent and have limited spending wherever possible, focusing on essential operations only. Thank you again for listening to me today, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. And if the chief wants to add anything, happy to pass along.
Chief, do you want to add anything first?
The only thing I would add is just on the recruiting side, just so the board is aware, we've taken a different approach, and we've had to a couple of times at the end when we get backgrounds back, where we have to give a seat back. We have a candidate, but we're not happy with their background. So we're giving the seat back to OPC as opposed to taking that recruit on and having to deal with it down the road. So we're working on ensuring that our recruiting process is much better. So thanks for that, Scarlett.
Thank you. For the board, any questions to Scarlett? Scarlett, good job. Thank you very much. Then next, if you would like to speak to requests made pursuant Community Safety Policing Act. You want to do that, Scott?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And just a quick overview. As we know, the Community Safety and Policing Act changed a few months back for the Section 19 request, now coming from the chiefs of police to fellow chiefs of police, opposed to through the board. And then we report back to the board those specifics requests that we need. I do think this is more of a temporary solution just with the transition of the CSPA. I think you'll see less Section 19 requests down the road as we get those Section 14 agreements more solidified with our policing partners. So those are more those long-term contracts we have with neighboring police agencies and on the provincial side as well. So those Section 14s are coming our way shortly. From our friends at the OPP, and then we'll mirror those with our neighbors beside us. So, but the three requests, one of them was for us to receive assistance, and two were for us to provide assistance.
Very good, thank you. Citizens Police Academy.
Yeah, certainly it was a great opportunity for us as per our strategic plan to bring back the Citizens Police Academy. I'd just like to say that Lisa DeCare took it upon her role here. She did a tremendous job. We got a class in They were here to see what's going on in policing. We had and in our report, I believe the agenda of what occurred was attached, where they got a tour of the station. They had the emergency response team. We had canine units, traffic units presentation. We had training unit, victim services, VWAP, which is another side of victim services, and special services. So kind of a whole, the gamut of the Kingston Police. Certainly, I know it's been a number of years since we did it. It was for big success, and of course, our community volunteers were involved. They were here at every event to assist in any way, and some members of our service, Amy Carter, Deb Miller, Jen Knott, and Donna Gard from the civilian side, and even our cell monitors were involved in helping out. So we took it as an opportunity to for our entire service to get together and show what we have, and we'll be as we've restarted it, it'll only get improve as we move on. So we're getting ready for the next one.
Next is the 2024 year in statistical report.
Thanks, Chair. And just as noted in the report, our cyber incident kind of delayed us getting you these stats. We were hoping to have a more wholesome review of 2024, which we've kind of outlined here in the second paragraph. That, as you can see, some of these stat categories dating back from November to December 31st are essentially we don't have to provide in this report. So if you look at our right side column, when we can compare year over year, generally speaking, our stats are very balanced. They're very close to one another. And depending on what stat category you're looking at, we're missing between 7 to 9 weeks of data, which is between 13.5 to 17% missing. And when you go to each stat category, they relatively represent a very straight line across. And the one I'll just point out really quickly is the calls for service. And it is a measuring stick that it seems to catch some attention. And if you take those metrics of somewhere between 13 and 17%, you're bringing your call volume between 45 and 47,000 calls, which really does balance back out to the that flat line that I spoke about. So the other one that we often get questions on at some of these meetings are the other criminal offenses section, and I just want to go over that really quickly. That some of those areas that we talk about are breach of probation, breach of release conditions, breach of the peace, some of our child exploitation and child pornography charges, indecent acts, obstructing peace officer, and a lot of our charges that pertain to the courthouse. So it's a large envelope of charges, and we often get asked kind of what some of those categories are contained within that envelope. I think the other ones kind of speak for themselves.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions from the board? No? Okay, then. Sure. Can we receive that? Thank you, Adam, Brian, all in favor? Thank you. Very good. We're going to move on to a recommendation report. I'll ask Gail to speak to the diversity plan working group, and she can answer any questions. Go ahead.
I didn't put it in your book. So that the board approved the proposed amendments to the bylaw 2502 as set out in report 2531. And that is revising the composition of the diversity plan working group and committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to mention that the reason that we are looking specifically at changing the composition of the committee actually came from the members of the committee in our first meeting. So I was really grateful for the engagement and that look at the terms of reference and the composition in particular. And this alignment, this realignment, I think better represents what it is that we want to do when developing the plan. So I do want to express my gratitude to the initial group of committee members. And should it be ratified by the members around the table today, I look forward to welcoming members, more members from the community and who self-select to apply. And Lori Sargent, our secretary to the committee and to the board, will be putting out a call should, as I say, should this be ratified. But again, we had our initial meeting and it was a very engaged and thoughtful meeting, and talking about this plan as a way forward with metrics, with solid recommendations to be used in tandem to what the city's doing and to what we want to do as a service. And so very grateful. If there are any questions.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? No? Can I get all in favor? Thank you. All right, next ratification of motion. Service level agreement, Corporation of the City of Kingston and the Kingston Police Services Board, that the Kingston Police Service Board ratify motion passed on by poll of quorum on board members, May 28th, 2025, pending the next scheduled board meeting, that the Kingston Police Services Board approved the service level agreement between the board and the Corporation of the City of Kingston dated May 21st, 2025, with respect to the City Hall Liaison Officer Pilot Project, and that the board authorizes the chair to sign the service level agreement on behalf of the board. First or seconder? Thank you, Jimmy, Gail, all in favor? Very good. Motions, addendum to agreement, Kingston Police Services Board and Kingston Accident Support Services, that the Kingston Police Service Board enter into addendum to the agreement between the board and the Kingston Accident Support Services to extend the agreement dated February 22nd, 2010 for an additional 20 years to September 30th, 2055, comprised of 4 additional 5-year terms, that the board authorizes the chair to execute the agreement on behalf of the board. Any questions about that? Adam, go ahead. Okay, it's typo. Okay. Questions? No, all good? Can I get a first or seconder? Gail, Adam, all in favor? Thank you. And then that's carried. So, and then as you, okay. Whereas the Kingston Police Services Board is committed to ensuring that the Kingston Police provide timely, compassionate, and transparent communication to family members and loved ones following the incident resulting in serious injury or death. And whereas such communications are critical to maintaining public trust, upholding community safety and well-being, and comply with principles and procedural fairness, dignity, and respect with affected persons. And whereas the Community Safety and Policing Act 2019 and related regulations emphasize community-oriented policing, professional conduct, and accountability. Therefore, be it resolved that the Kingston Police Services Board direct the Chief of Police to undertake the review of the current policies, procedures, and operational orders related to the communication with loved ones, victims, and next of kin in incidents that result in serious injury or death, including but not limited to notification protocols, including roles and responsibilities for delivering such communications, timeliness and methods of communication with affected individuals, coordination with other emergency vehicle services and partner agencies in delivering information, support services and resources provided or made available to loved ones, victims, and next of kin, training provided to members of the service on trauma-informed and culturally appropriate communication practices, identification of any gaps, risks, or opportunities for improvement in existing protocols, relevant best practices from other jurisdictions and recommendations from oversight bodies such as the Office of the Inspectorate General of Policing or the Special Investigations Unit as appropriate. Be it further resolved that the Chief of Police report back to the board with findings of any recommended policy amendments, operational improvements, or additional training and initiatives no later than 3 months from the date of this motion. That's, yeah. Greg, go ahead. Please do.
And just for the board, my procedures are driven by board policy. And I guess do you want me to go ahead and do this before we have the board policy on each of the kind of, the request in this motion covers a number of my procedures, which will also be governed by a number of your policies. So generally, and under the new CSPA, you're required, I think there's about 117, am I close? 113. So do you want me to do this and then you're going to give a policy and then I can add that direction to it? Or do we want to do it kind of, I can identify, here's all the procedures that we have that relate to all of these, because there's a number. And then kind of pass that to the board and go, hey, maybe we can prioritize these or these 17, I think it's 17 procedures. Prioritize those 17 policies. So then the board's policy and my procedure are, instead of me doing it once and then you saying, the board just saying, hey, let's do it this way, and then going back to do it. Maybe we could do it in alignment. Would that be agreeable?
Bill, your thoughts?
As a member of the policy committee, I think that makes infinite good sense. Thank you, Chief. And without presupposing the outcome, I think that absolutely that is what we want to do here. And the time frame, again, we would like to get our ducks in order, have those bylaws passed at this level, and then certainly work with you to encourage. Thank you.
Christian, all in favor? Good. Okay. I don't know why that went off. Or if I turned it off. Therefore, be it resolved that the Kingston Police Service Board direct the Chief of Police to provide a comprehensive demographic breakdown of the Kingston Police, including both sworn and civilian members, for presentation at the board meeting scheduled for July 17, 2025, and that the demographic breakdown include, where available, information, gender identity, race, ethnicity, age, years of service, and other relevant diversity-related categories, while ensuring confidentiality and compliance with acceptable privacy legislation, and that the chief include, where appropriate, recommendations specific to sworn and civilian members that would support equity, diversity, and inclusion within each component of the service. Gail, you want to speak to that? All right.
Okay. You have
So,
to have a second
Greg.
first.
Yes, first, thank you for the firster and the seconder. I would like to ask that we defer this motion. Is this a point that I can do that? Yeah, the reason I would like, yeah, I would like to ask that we defer this motion in consultation with the chief, and the fact that we are very pleased to be in the final stages of recruitment for an HR director who I think will be integral into the appropriate collecting of this data. I would like to ask that this motion be deferred to next month, and that we hopefully are able to wrap a time period around that to allow for effective gathering of the data necessary for us to start benchmarking when we look at our diversity plan and our strategic recommendations go forward.
Do you want to vote on
The deferral.
a deferral? All in favor? Very good. Thank you. Does that go for the next part to the D as well? Okay. Whereas the Kingston Police Service Board has established a diversity plan working group committee to prepare a diversity plan in compliance with the Community Safety and Policing Act 2019. Whereas the Diversity Plan Working Group Committee has prepared a recruitment release to seek applications from community members who identify as belonging to equity service groups and identified in the release. And whereas the release is intended to promote broad community engagement and inclusive representation in the working group committee, therefore, be it resolved that the Kingston Police Services Board approve the recruitment release as presented by the chair of the Diversity Plan Working Group Committee for distribution to the public and relevant community stakeholders. That was from Gail. Can I get a seconder? Jimmy, thank you. All in favor? Good. Gail, you want to speak to that? We did all in favor.
I'll just speak briefly to it, Mr.
Sure.
Chair. Thank you. I just wanted to, again, this is a bit of a tag on to what we did as a working group on our initial meeting. And so what we now want to do is go out to the public and in regard to the release and get it broadly disseminated. And we really look forward to members of the community engaging with this committee and supporting the work that this board has charged us with. So thank you so much.
Now we can do the all in favor. Okay. Thanks, Gail. Thanks for your patience. We're going to go to new business. We're going to talk about the Diversity Plan Working Group Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that everything that we've covered in the previous motions has been a voluminous update from me. So I would be happy to defer unless there's specific questions from the members.
Okay. Then the OAPSB Annual Conference and AGM verbal report for participants, Adam Coven and Gail McAllister. Adam, do you have anything to say about the event?
Yeah, I think as a new member, thank you for the opportunity. I guess new items were set up, such as workshop groups, which allowed us to meet other of our counterparts around the province. Some of their speakers, including Solicitor General that came through, also having the Chief of London, where we were being hosted to discuss their benefits of working with their board and their successes. gave a great opportunity to understand what the roles and activities that we should be, or as a new member, what I should be focused on, while also speaking to some members that I had met who have been former police officers, their challenges they have on their smaller communities. But the best, I think, was just this ability to hear from other people who have gone before to sort of give a guide. So I felt I came back with a wealth of knowledge, which is not easy to grasp on such a narrowly focused board. So I really appreciated the opportunity to go. The other thing it does do is that I felt that that we that attended were able to understand each other more from just a board meeting, but also as people. And I found myself even more comfortable working. So I think it's may also be something that's critical and should be recommended to any new board member that they come on, that they should attend at least once in the first year, because I do feel more capable, at least knowing the direction that I need to follow. So thank you for sending me, and I did find it to be a good wealth of knowledge.
Go, would you like to share?
I think, thank you, Adam. I think the only other thing that I did want to mention is that there will be materials coming to the board that have come out of each of the training sessions, and that the OAPSB is hoping that many of these training sessions will actually, this was a mini session, and they're hoping to bring them out to boards and have a more fulsome training. One of the sessions that we went to put on by one of our Diane Smithson from Zone 2, she did a session that actually provided an absolutely outstanding package that's almost like an orientation package for new members. And hopefully we're going to see that come out so that board members really get a seriously look at the impact of what it is that they've been asked to do as members of the board. So it was really a highly valuable conference, and I appreciate the board's support to attend it. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks for going, both of you. And Laurie. All right, so I'm going to ask if there was any other new business. No? In that case, we're going to move in camera. We'll say 7 minutes.
Lori, what do you want me to do?
As soon as I get a mover and seconder here, just hold on for a second, Christian.
Okay, first or seconder. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Adam. All in favor? That was painful.
Lori, stay on.
It's